Welcome to the Let Me Be Free podcast. My name is Jackie.
And my name is Alwynn.
We're two sisters from Ireland living in Australia, navigating our healing journeys together, and this is our podcast, Let Me Be Free.
Hello, my beautiful sister, Alwynn. How's it going?
Yeah, it is going.
I'm so glad that we had an opportunity to do a recording today, because when you said yesterday that you couldn't do it because Shay was going to be home from daycare, and then today you were like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. And the part of me that needs everything to be like on time, and when I say I'm going to do it was like, okay, take a deep breath, Jackie. It's okay to let go of control. And then you were like, okay, well, maybe we could do a quick recording, just like an update on what's happening. And I was like, oh, thank God.
I'm
I was
outside
going
my
to have
house.
to go away and do some internal work there.
Yeah. God forbid you do any internal work. For everyone, I'm just outside my house, so there may be some cars that drive by and pass. But yeah, I guess for us, we took the break, the hiatus, and in that time as well, I stood back from the group, and the amazing Isabel had offered to keep the group running in my absence. I just didn't know how long I'd be. I didn't even know what the purpose of my taking a step back was. But
well, when we initially took the break, you weren't even intending on taking a break from, when we took a break from the podcast, you weren't even intending on taking a break from the Facebook. Like I needed to take the break because I was going on holiday. I was going to Indonesia for 4 weeks, and then either side of that I was at work. So I was going to be pretty much like gone for almost 2 months. So I was like, okay, let's take a break from the podcast until, for that time period, because also it's really important for me that I have time away. And I find that, like, I'm the type of person who really needs to disconnect from everything to know that I'm on the right track. So it was really important for me when I was going away. I was like, okay, I want to take a break from everything, not just the podcast, from work, from the stuff I'm doing on my property, to take a break from absolutely everything. And then you were kind of like, okay, well, we'll just both take a break. But I think we were both in the same position. By the time we were taking the break, both of us were feeling very run down, and it was starting to feel really hard to get a podcast episode out every week on top of everything else that we were dealing with. So I think it came at a really good time.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Then you decided to take a step back from the group, which again I thought was a great idea.
Yeah, and I think the reality for me was I was kind of like, well, I haven't even been that active recently, but I realized that for me, doing anything less than 100% is just, it kills me. I hate it. And I set up that group with the intention of, I wanted to be on there, I wanted to respond to people, and when I wasn't, I just felt like I was failing. And that's one of my root traumas is that I think that sense of failure is in everyone, that fear of failure, of failing something, everyone not being good enough. But yeah, no, I felt it kind of came to a point where I just was like, I realized how, like you said, how burnt out I was. And in taking the time out, actually, and in taking that space, I've come off all social media. I actually realized how overwhelmed I was. I think I was really just trying to keep so many balls up in the air. And since not being on the group and not doing the podcast, it really has given me an opportunity to go so much deeper into myself, as if that's a fucking possibility, in all fairness. Like the amount of depths of work I've done over these past few years. But I guess what I recognized was, from the moment I did the Janet Lansbury podcast, a lot of everything I did was for other people. Like a lot of the work that I was doing, a lot of everything that I was sharing, I was doing it with a lot of my energy going to, I want to help others. And I really got to a point where I just was like, I need to figure out who I am, what I want, what I need, and just rediscover who I was without being anything, because I feel like I started getting wrapped up in within my ego with, I need to, change the world, I need to do all of these things. But really there was a strong voice inside of me that was saying, yeah, but what about me? What about fun? What about joy? What about happiness? What about all of the things that we need? Do we ever get to get a look in, And so taking space from the group, I thought would free up more time, would free up more energy. But in actual fact, what I found is, I don't know, I actually feel like it is actually more so just given me the opportunity and more capacity to delve even deeper into the things that are holding me back, into the things that I guess I maybe wouldn't have had capacity to delve into if I had been like, I really just felt like I was paper thin with the amount of places I was putting my energy. And in that absence, I really feel like I've gone more a bit hermity and definitely have had more capacity for joy and playing with the kids. But I've also definitely found that I've really gone deeper into the traumas and the wounds with a stronger view on the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, nice. And did you do that by, specifically taking time out in each day to go through that, or did you do it because there was things in your life that were forcing you to look at things?
No, like for me, it's always intention, always. Like, so, I stopped the podcast or we took the break from the podcast in the group. And so my clear intention for myself was, I was like, I want my life to be easier. I want to create a foundation where I feel like my kids are in a good space, where we as a family are functioning in a really good way. And at that point, like, I was trying to put the boys to bed. It was taking me like an hour and a half to get them to bed. And I just kind of said, when I stopped the podcast and the group, I really was like, I really just held that intention. I want my home life to be easier in order to do whatever I want to do, in order to, take the next steps in my journey, whether that's just actually allowing more joy and capacity and joy and happiness and space for that in my life. I realized that our home life, the way that our family ran, needed to change. And so I just was like, saying it to my husband as well. I was like, I am going to get the boys into a better bedtime routine. I don't know how that's going to happen. Miracle will have to happen for them to go to sleep by themselves. But I know that these are the things, and I want us to have dinners together. I want our home life to be flowing and easier and more natural, so that when I do decide to do whatever I do next, I will know that at least my family is number one, and they're I guess it's taken care of. And so that then, in trying to get the boys to sleep by themselves, when you make an intention, all of the obstacles and all of the wounds that are stopping you from actually having what you want come up. So I had so much triggers and wounds and traumas come up in the wake of trying to get the boys to sleep by themselves. When I actually decided to get the boys to make that commitment to get them to go to bed by themselves, I was like hyperventilating. I felt nauseous. And what I realized and recognized was that I just couldn't bear their suffering. I had a belief system that, I can't allow them to suffer, especially because I felt like I caused so much of their suffering in their early life. I punished myself ever since. And any bit of suffering that they experienced, I felt like it was my job to stop them from suffering. But in that, I had listened to you know, Untamed by what's her name again?
Glennon Doyle.
Yeah, I listened to Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and one of the things that really hit home with me was that saying of, we can do hard things. And
Oh
I
my God,
really,
I love that. That's my new favorite saying.
yeah, it's
We
the
can
most
do hard things.
it's the most empowering statement, because
Yes.
I was going to put the boys down to bed and they were crying and they were like, I can't do it, Mom, I'm scared. And that is like, the idea of my children being scared or feeling scared in the world just triggers me so much. So I'll do everything to avoid it. And I realized that I was, I honestly was I was getting in the way of them learning how to do hard things, because I kept on trying to protect them from hard things. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I got them into bed and I was like really calm, and I had to really school myself and convince myself that they are safe, that they can do this, that they can do these hard things, and they'll be better off because of it. They will learn that resilience. And I remember the second night that I was putting them to bed, and I did the same thing, and they were sad. And I said, I know that you're sad, but you know what, darling? I know that you're so strong and we can do hard things. I know that you've done so many hard things before. You jump off big cliffs into water, you do all of these things. So I know that you can do this thing too. And so I went out, and I remember coming back in to check on them, and they were still in bed, which was a miracle. And I gave Bobby a kiss on the head, and I was like, I'm so proud of you. And I could see how proud of himself he was for doing this hard thing, for moving through the fear, for facing these big scary things and overcoming it. And I just realized how much of my mothering has stopped them from enduring any suffering, because a lot of it actually I felt like was to do, one, with how much I suffered as a child, but two, with my own guilt at
Mm.
having been the cause of their suffering. It was like my own penance for
Yes.
being mentally unstable in their earlier years, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things as well that I really wanted to make note of um in that, with regards to safety as well, was something I've been working on a lot. And I think that it's really important to say here, because I think that so many of us, you, me, everyone really deals with and suffers with and struggles with. You know, a few months ago, Bobby, as I had said, he was really having a really hard day. And I could see that it wasn't just a normal kind of like struggle. It was a very deep wound, real pain that he was struggling with. And I remember went down to bed with him, and I was lying in bed with him, and I was like, what is it that you're struggling with? What's going on? And he had looked at me, and the raw fear that he had on his face, he said, I am afraid. Everywhere I go, all of the time, I am afraid. And I just imagined him at school, I imagined him everywhere, and my heart just broke for him, because I believed him. I really did
Mm.
believe that he does feel that fear everywhere he goes, all of the time. He eats like he's really obsessed with eating. He needs to have sugar. Sugar helps him feel safe. So when he eats, it regulates, it makes him feel safe in the world. And he's learned that from me, because that's exactly the way I am. But that saying at that time, I was able to understand it and perceive it as, you know, yes, I know that he has this experience, but also was a reflection of, I know that I felt that way my whole childhood. I know I felt that way, and I still feel that way. I feel so unsafe in the world. Um, and so in the last, since I feel like pausing from the podcast and pausing from the group, I really feel like I have been so dedicated to making and creating a sense of safety within myself,
Mm.
because my own inner child has been saying that to me a lot recently. You know, I am afraid everywhere I go, all of the time. I am afraid. And that's not something that's in response to our environment or this world that I actually live in. But as you know, and I'm sure many people who listen to this know, that is a result of being a child and never having a safe place to land, never
Mm-hmm.
having that opportunity to allow ourselves to feel and grieve and experience that. And one of the other things that also came up to me that I'll just make note on was, and this fascinated me, and I don't know, Jackie, if you actually were aware of this or if you thought this yourself, but what I realized recently was, you know, we talk about PTSD and CPTSD, and I kind of just floated it around as a saying. I don't really quite, I don't know, I'm kind of like, I feel like I don't fit into that category as much because, you know, when you think about, say, PTSD and war veterans and they're having flashbacks and they're, you know, they're hearing bombs and there's fireworks, you know. But what I realized and what I recognized was, you know, my greatest fear is this monster within myself, you know, that monster that came out when I was really at my worst and when all my trauma came up and I was just, you know, manic essentially. But it was really interesting because what came to me recently was where war veterans experience PTSD when, you know, I remember watching Grey's Anatomy and he sees the fan on the roof and he
Yes.
leaves. Yeah, so he gets a flashback and he ends up strangling her, trying to strangle her because he feels like he's back in war, you know?
Yeah.
And that came to me recently. And what I recognized was that where war veterans have these moments where things trigger them, like loud noises or whatever, what I experienced that time with the kids was PTSD. I didn't actually join those dots before, but when I was attacking the kids, when I was lashing out at the kids, I didn't recognize that I was actually having flashbacks. And I didn't, instead of, you know, where he saw the fan on the roof and he believed it was a helicopter and he was in the middle of war, I realized that the kids were the fan on the roof.
Yes.
And that every day in that period, I really wasn't aware that my children were in front of me. A big part of me, because of the depths of the trauma that I was re-experiencing, I realized that that was a like PTSD flashback where I
Yes.
couldn't control my body, where I couldn't stop myself from lashing out at them and reacting to them and scaring, terrorizing, whatever. I always had such shame and hatred for myself for acting in those ways. And it was only recently that I realized I was no more capable of changing my reactions than that man was in that moment when he saw the fan on the roof.
Yeah.
I was in no more control of my body because I always had this belief system that I was still there. I should have stopped it. I should have done something. It's still my fault. But it was the realization that, wow, I wasn't having visual flashbacks where, you know, I was seeing something happen, but my body, I was having a full-on body flashback. And the kids were no longer there in front of me.
Yeah, so it's actually called an emotional flashback. So it's like the difference between PTSD and complex PTSD. Oftentimes in PTSD, it's like a situation that's happened, like, for example, you're talking about Grey's Anatomy, and it's Dr. Owen Hunt. He was in the army, and then he went to Grey Sloan Memorial Hospital, and he's in a relationship with Christina Yang. And one night, he's asleep, and then the fan in the room makes him flashback to a helicopter situation, and he starts choking Christina Yang. And so he visually sees something, you know, like that's like the typical PTSD flashback, is where you're actually reliving a memory and you're responding according to that memory. So what he does is starts choking her because he believes that she's the enemy, and then he kind of comes back, and he's like, oh my God, what the hell is happening? And what you're talking about is an emotional flashback, which is more typical with complex PTSD survivors. And that's often because often with complex PTSD, it's when numerous traumas happen, often in childhood, and oftentimes the actual memory will have been suppressed. So you're not getting the video reel, but your body is having the emotional response. So it's the difference between a emotional flashback and a typical flashback that you would imagine when you think of a war veteran. And absolutely, I think people understanding that can relieve so much guilt and fear. And then as soon as we have the guilt, fear, and shame out of the way, then we can actually look at it and start to heal it. But for as long as the shame stops us from getting help, we're not actually getting it better in any way.
Yeah.
So I think that's huge, that recognizing how it impacts you and recognizing that it's actually completely normal for what you went through.
Yeah. And as well, like, you know, it's just because you don't have that. Well, you know, I've heard of some people that do have the visual flashback, but it's nearly, at least it can, I feel like in some ways there's that sense that can be made of the way that you're reacting in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when you have the situations that I was having, which was constant emotional flashbacks all day long, you know, it's easier to perceive and believe that that you're just a bad person, that you're
Mm-hmm.
just not able to function properly, or
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, you need to get a hold of your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You need to breathe more. You need to do more
Mm-hmm.
self-care. And, you know, it's like, I always think, even though I know that I couldn't have done any more in the moment back then, even though I know that I couldn't have helped how I responded, it is still very hard to to fully let go and forgive myself for the actions, especially because it's not as if I saw someone coming at me with a knife. There was, my
Mm-hmm.
little children were there, but like that, the intensity, I guess what we would say with regards the emotional flashbacks, is the intensity of the reaction is way beyond proportionate to
Yeah.
reality. And
Yes.
I think, you know, a lot of us can say, oh yeah, but like if the kid draws on the wall, like everyone will get angry. But really, it's also that perception of, you know, if a kid draws on the wall, it's, what is the perception I am having in that moment? Like if the kids drew on the wall at that point in time, the perception that I was having was, they don't love me, no one loves me, and that was triggering
Mm-hmm.
an emotional flashback of the pain. Well, that's why it went into this stream, even though I wasn't conscious to these thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It came into the stream of, it started with them drawing on the wall, then it was, I'm already suffering so much, they want to make me suffer more, they don't love
Mm-hmm.
me, no one loves me, well, that's why you deserve to be abused, you deserved everything. And it went into that deep pain,
Spiral.
the spiral, and then the emotional flashback. And then my reaction can only then match the depths of the emotional flashback. But in reality, the kids drawing on the wall is, okay, it's not ideal, and yes, I can be frustrated, but there's a difference between frustration and all out rage. You know,
Mm-hmm.
all out rage and that level of anger comes from that depths of emotional flashbacks.
And I think, Ollie, it all links back to what you were initially saying, which was how safe you feel in the world. At that point in your life, at that point in our life, we had just uncovered so many memories, and we were having so much um pushback and stuff from family members, and we felt so unsafe.
Yeah.
We, like, and it's interesting. We always talk about teams. We find that we'll often say to each other, oh, I feel like the theme right now is this. Like, I feel like there's a lot of things coming up for me at the moment around this, and there's a lot of people coming to me. Like, before we finished the podcast, there was a lot of stuff coming up around couples, like relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but just like relationships in general, and people a lot of people struggling in their relationships with their partners and their relationships with their work bosses. And there just seemed to be quite a lot going on around that. And I feel like the theme for this last month and a half, 2 months, has been safety, has been feeling safe or not feeling safe. Like I was explaining to you when I came back from my trip, like I've traveled a lot, you know, from the age of 17. I have been traveling so much. I've lived in the States, I've lived in Central America, obviously I've lived in Ireland. I've spent, you know, years of my life traveling around and always wanted more, always wanted to keep going. You know, no matter how much time I went for, it was never enough. And then I went on this trip, and even though it was a really good trip and I got to spend some really good quality time with friends, which was amazing, I didn't feel safe, which is so unusual for me. Like, I just wanted to be at home. And I said it to you, and I was like, I don't know if it's because where I'm living now on my property, I think it's the first time in my life where I've really felt like at home. Like, I feel like this is where I want to be. This is where I want to, like, I can see myself living here forever. I just love it. I love the tranquility. This is exactly what I've always wanted. And maybe that's why. But then we started talking, and it just seemed like this feeling of like not being safe is such a big theme at the moment. And I think what you said to me at the time was, you know, maybe you're just noticing more what you're feeling. You know, like maybe it's not so much that all of a sudden you're not feeling safe as you're traveling, but maybe it's more so that you're actually more attuned to what you are feeling.
Yeah. And I think that's it. Like, I think, you know, it's being before, I feel like you could have packed up your parts and put them in nice, neat boxes and gone on holidays. Whereas I feel like you've opened the lid on your parts. You've like, you know, all parts of you, I feel like, get to have their say. And whereas before
Yes.
you would have been able to kind of ignore all other parts of you and just allow that part of you that just found the freedom and the joy, that part also existed within this holiday, but also alongside that part was the part that was like, it's, you know, it's not really safe here. There's not, you know, there's lots of things I'm not comfortable with here. But it was like the blinders, isn't it? The blinders that go on in life,
Yes.
where even when we go into work situations, you know, when we
Yes.
say, oh, but like when I'm in work, I'm very comfortable. Like that's what I say all the time. When I'm working, it's fucking easy. Life is easy. If I take on clients, it's like I don't think about it. I don't need to do anything about it. I just show up and it's easy. And then I go into mom mode and I feel like I'm a fucking bomb just about to explode. Like it's, you know, but yeah, it is. I think it's that. I think it's a mix of the both though, because I think the fact that you do have somewhere you feel so safe, I think the contrast
Yes.
is more, I think you probably didn't have anything to work it off before. You were always feeling unsafe. Whereas now
Yes.
you have a bit more of that foundational safety. And so,
Yeah.
but
And
safety,
the thing is, like, it's not that and I think it's important to say, like, it's not that I felt unsafe because of where I was or who I was with. Like, I've lived with you and Rob. I
yeah,
don't, it's not like I feel unsafe living with you guys. I've lived, you know, in Frio, I lived at the beach house, and it was so amazing, right beside the beach with all of these people who I really loved. It's not that I didn't feel, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it's not that I didn't feel safe there, but I think it's so, it's like where I am now, it's so quiet and it's so tranquil. And I have trees for neighbors. And I get,
I
you
think
know, like,
there's the answer. I think the reality is, you know, it's about that safety, not in the, it's about that safety inside of ourselves. And you, were in the most beautiful places, you had the most beautiful people around you, but you weren't alone. Like
Yeah.
when you have to show up or be around or tend to or respond to anyone else but the trees, you still have to be something.
Yes.
Whereas, where you live now, there is no one around you. Like no one can expect anything from you. No one needs anything from you. Only when you feel you want to be needed are you needed.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're living with us, it's torture. Like, you could feel safe, but then you've got me, and then you've got Rob wanting to chat to you, and then you've got the kids, and then you might try and go into your room for tranquility, and the kids will be knocking on the door, Jackie, 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 you come out, Jackie. That's not safety. And the same with, you lived in a share house in Fremantle. And so no matter what, even though you had your own room, there was every possibility that someone could need you at any point in time. Whereas I feel like where you are now, I think it eliminates that fear of being needed or pulled on, or having expectations being drafted on you, and as well the simplicity of it as well, because
Yeah.
you
And I think as well, because I'm not reliant on any service, like it's not, if the power goes off, it doesn't matter to me. I am fully on solar. If the water in the local council is contaminated, doesn't matter to me. I'm fully water from roof rainwater collection. Like I don't have to depend on anyone. I'm completely self-sufficient. I'm sounding like a complete hermit. And I am, like, in many ways, but I'm very social at the same time. I'm the most social hermit. But everything is everything is in my control, and that makes me feel safe. And it's like equally, like if something doesn't work, I also have to be the one to fix it. Like I got home this time, and of course I'm absolutely delighted to be home. And my solar charger wasn't working. It wasn't charging the batteries. And there's so many times where I come home and something's not working, like literally every time something's not working. And I start to panic and I go, oh my God, how am I going to fix this? Like, if this doesn't work, how am I going to have electricity? Everything in my fridge is going to go bad. Like all of these, like my water pump won't work, so I can't have a shower. Like everything, it just starts to like spiral. But this time I came home and it wasn't working. And I was just like, at first I started to panic, and then I go, no, Jackie, just work the problem. So I was like, okay, what do I need to check if it's the cord, check if it's this, check if it's that. And eventually I fixed it. And I was like, the more I do that stuff, the more I fix my own problems on the land, the more safe I feel, the more confident I believe, the more I believe in myself to keep myself safe. Does that make sense?
definitely, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's really, really empowering, actually. And I think that, and I think that that's a really good point to make with regards to the healing journey and the healing process. That, like they say, there's not one way to get to the end point. And I think even just in that example, I think that, like you said, being able to be self-sufficient, being able to fix your own problems is, again, it's about that self-trust, isn't it? Trusting that you have your own back. And because we had to abandon that ourselves for such a long time, it's reestablishing that relationship and that trust with ourselves is really the foundation of being able to overcome all obstacles. So whatever way that you achieve that, whether that's fixing the motor or whatever that may be, it is that kind of sense of, well, I have some capacity to change my outcome.
I have what I need to keep myself safe. Like the 5-year-old version of me, when that problem happens, she's not going to be able to pay for someone to come out and fix it. She's not going to be able to know to call a certain person. She doesn't even have a phone. She doesn't have money. She doesn't have anything. Like when the younger version of me didn't have the means or tools or ability to keep myself safe in a moment where I wasn't safe. And it's like now knowing and realizing, and every time I do it, where I'm like, okay, something's happened, I've got to fix it. Every time I fix it, it's like reassuring that little girl inside me, I got this now.
Yeah,
I got us.
definitely.
We can do hard things. I
Yeah,
freaking love that. I
I
don't have
know.
any tattoos, but I actually wrote that in Sharpie on my arm because I
Oh,
just
that's
loved it so
brilliant.
much. I'm
I
still not
know.
going to get a tattoo, but I just love it.
It is. I love it too. And it really, I remember going down the road one day and I think it was the battle of should I get a coffee or not? And I get really bad anxiety if I can't get a coffee. And I was like, we can do hard things. We can go and get to this appointment without getting a coffee. We can do hard things. Such a basic thing, but it was killing me. But
It's such a basic. Oh my God, that it makes me laugh so hard because so many of your hard things are around like stuff that you put in your mouth.
yeah.
Coffee.
Food.
My
Let's reiterate that.
solar charger isn't working, which means I can't put electricity into my batteries, which I can't power my phone or my fridge or but for you it's coffee.
But it's actually, do you know what's really fascinating, right? So this is a really good teller of it all, okay? So I'm sure everyone knows by now, my anxiety needle is I get coffee and cake and it helps me feel safe, you know? And
Yeah.
so recently, so my intention has been to create more safety. And the reality is the safety I'm looking for is not in my external environment. It's the safety to exist within my body, to be able to slow down, to be able to be present. And one of the things that showed me that that was really working, that I was really actually making strides, was I borrowed my friend's coffee machine. And I was like, I still, even if I've had coffee machines before, I've always needed to get out to the cafe. I needed to get to a cafe. I needed to get a coffee. Whatever it was about that whole system just made my anxiety reduce massively. And so, anyways, I found that I got the coffee machine and I didn't have any desire to go to a cafe for like that was about
Oh.
2 weeks. I was just having coffee in the morning. I didn't have any interest in going to a cafe after that or getting a coffee or whatever. And I was like, wow, that is massive. And one of the things that I recognized was, in that time, I had really kind of communicated to these parts of me, because one of the things that I realized was what I feel like I run from most is, it's the beast inside of me. It's the part of me that I guess I call it the beast. That's the part of me that came out when I was at my worst with the kids. It's like I'm afraid that part is still in me, and if I stop, then it's gonna take over and it's gonna run the show. Like I always have this fear. And it's as if, I don't know, I'm sure there's some horror movie out there or some show out there where it's like another part takes over you and you no longer have control of your body. And it's like this evil mutant that is in control of your body. And there's always nearly this fear that if I slow down, this part of me will take over and it will hurt the kids, or it will, it will do something really bad and I won't be strong enough to stop it. And so, in this finding safety within my own body, I got to a point one day where I stopped and I was sitting here and I said, I'm so fucking tired. So another thing I'll say in around this was, I used to have recurring nightmares for years, and I don't know, for a long time. But anyways, the recurring nightmares were someone was always running after me with a knife or coming to kill me. And eventually, anyways, I realized that I'm sick of running. And so I would say, this is only a dream. This is only a nightmare. I can survive. I can get out of this. So I would always turn around and I would say, come kill me. And the person would come and they go to stab me and I'd wake up. And so then there was other nightmares where they were running after me and I was like, no, this is a nightmare. This is a nightmare. And I'd create a cliff and I would jump off the cliff and I would wake up. And so I did that in loads of different nightmares, where there was this like Ursula from the Little Mermaid, that kind of witch one, and she was whipping everyone. And I said to her, I was like, I'm not afraid of you. You know, this is a dream, this is a nightmare, and you can't control me. And eventually they stopped. Eventually all the nightmares stopped, because I kept on turning around facing them. So I realized in this trying to find safety within my own self, that I had to do what I did in the dreams and the nightmares, and make the intention to stop running and turn around and face the demons within me, you know, face what I was running from. And my inner world was saying, yeah, but it's this beast and it's a monster and it's going to hurt you. But I knew that, you know, what I was communicating and what I understood was, there is no beast inside of me. There is pain and there is sadness. And sometimes there is a reaction to that pain and that sadness, but I'm tired of running. I'm so tired of running from myself, because I can't feel safe in this world. I can't be present with my kids. I can't feel joy or happiness if I can't live in my own body. And so I made that intention to stop and to turn around and to face everything that I've been running from. And I think that's where I really started traveling into the depths in the last few weeks, especially. And it's been fucking amazing. It's been really transformative. And I really feel like, you know, again, that was a real natural progression, where I stopped going to the cafe. And that was a real, I guess, a tangible reaction and response to the fact that I'm tired of running. I'm tired of running from the parts of me. And that's what I was doing. I would get to the cafe in order to quiet the demons inside of my head. You know, it's like feeding the demons inside of me. And I just was like, I'm so sick of playing this game of not being empowered, not being strong, not being able to sit within my own body without feeling absolutely petrified. I want to be safe in this world. And in order to be safe in this world, I need to be safe in my own body. And the other thing that I've become very aware of is children. I really notice now that when I see children, I really, really notice how a lot of children in our society do not feel safe in their body, and how a lot of the behaviors that we see are a response to that lack of safety. Like if you look and take my oldest boy there, Bobby, like he is, you know, if he gets up, whatever, like I used to be really strict with sugar, and I have to now start seeing it as he has severe anxiety. If he doesn't have, like if I said to him this morning, say for example, if I said that he could have a cookie, and then I said, oh no, actually, I'm not going to get you a cookie, he would be just distraught. He would be terrified. He would be so sad. He would be grieving and everything. And I realized that, you know, he uses food in order to feel safe in his body. And until I can role model what it means to be safe in my own body, then only then will I be able to help him to feel safe in this world. Because if his mom doesn't know how to feel safe in this world, if his mom reacts and acts to this world as if it's a dangerous place to be, how is he ever going to feel safe? I can try and convince him that he's safe, but how can I convince my children that they're safe in the world if they can only really learn from what I model to them? And you know, both of them, like they've made comments recently, because I've been doing a lot of inner work. They've noticed and made comments that I am very busy, that I've been going a lot, that I'm working a lot. And they want me to be present with them. They want me to slow down. And I understand and I'm aware that that will come. But at the moment, with what I'm trying to work through, I'm trying to relearn how to be safe within my body, and I have to give myself grace. And once I do that, then I can help my boys to relearn how to exist in this world in a safe way, not to use sugar to numb their pain or use the iPad to numb out the fear of existing or their big motion. Only then I feel, when I feel safe in my body, can I help them to come into their own bodies and feel safe within the world. So that's, you know, not only doing it for me, but doing it because they also deserve it. Because
Yeah.
feeling unsafe in the world, I think, is the most horrendous experience that we all have to endure.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we end, I wanted to talk to you about what we're doing from here on out. I know that you have been saying that you're still not in a position, you don't know yet what is the right thing to do for you, because everything is quite up in the air at the moment, and you're not sure about, you know, whether to continue doing the podcast, whether to continue doing anything. It seems like at the moment you're just in this place where you're just not sure what the future holds. But I need certainty to
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
safe in the world.
yeah.
So I was wondering, you know, if we really
I
take
think,
the pressure off and we just say, look, let's maybe do it once a month, because once a
yeah,
week is just too much pressure. I understand that. And rather than putting the pressure on of having the interviews and having people lined up and all this kind of stuff, and, you know, let's just take the pressure right off, and let's just say, for now, let's just do a podcast once a month, and we'll just come and chat like what we're doing now. And maybe in the new year, we can reassess where we're at, where you're at, what you're feeling you want to
yeah,
do.
definitely. I think that's achievable. So yeah, let's do once a month for the moment, and
Mhm.
then we can decide what that looks like from there.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks, sis.
Thank you. I'll chat to you later.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. If you haven't done so already, please join our Facebook group, Let Me Be Free, The Wounded Inner Child, and post, either anonymously or not, what's going on for you in your world. We'd also be delighted if you would share this podcast or the Facebook group with one person who you think would benefit from the information. Be along, Mahaguf. Have a beautiful day.